It was raining, and a broke, widowed father had just enough money left to buy a loaf of bread. But when he saw a shivering teenager counting coins for food, he gave away his last 5. The next night nearly dropped his plate when the boy appeared on TV, dressed in gold, called Your Highness. But this wasn't just chance. That small act of kindness was about to drag him and his little girl into a storm of lies, prejudice, and a truth, connecting them to the prince's world in ways he could never imagine. Why did fate put them in each other's path? And when the whole town turns against him, will that 5 be the thing that destroys his life or saves it? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The rain drummed steadily against the windows of Ethan Cole's small apartment. He rolled over in bed, squinting at the alarm clock, 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes before it was set to go off. With a quiet groan, he swung his legs over the side of the bed, careful not to let the old springs squeak too loudly. Lily was still sleeping in the next room. He padded to the kitchen in worn slippers, automatically reaching for his phone to check his bank balance. The blue light illuminated his tired face as the numbers loaded. His heart sank. The balance stared back at him. 438. Rent was due tomorrow. 450. $12 short, he muttered, running a hand through his graying hair. He'd been picking up extra shifts at the machine shop when he could, but with the recent slowdown, work had been sparse. The sound of small feet shuffling across carpet made him look up. Lily appeared in her favorite unicorn pajamas, her dark hair a mess of tangles. "Morning, Dad," she yawned, climbing onto one of the kitchen chairs. "Morning, sweetheart." Ethan managed to smile, tucking away his worry. "Ready for some breakfast?" He opened the cabinet, already knowing what he'd find. One nearly empty box of cereal rattled as he took it down. Lily didn't seem to notice, already chattering about choir practice later. "Miss Sarah says we're learning a new song today, and Jenny's mom is bringing cookies for everyone." "That's great, honey." Ethan poured the last of the cereal into her bowl, adding the milk that needed to be used up today anyway. He watched her eat, his own stomach growling, but he ignored it. There was still half a loaf of bread and some bologna, enough for a sandwich later. After getting Lily ready for school and packing her backpack, Ethan walked her to the bus stop under his old umbrella. The rain was coming down harder now, creating rivers along the curb. "Have a good day at school," he said, kneeling to hug her. "I'll see you at choir practice later." "Love you, Dad." Lily squeezed him tight before climbing onto the bus. Ethan watched until the bus turned the corner, then headed toward the depot. He'd heard through a friend that they needed day laborers for a construction project. The walk was long, but he couldn't spare the bus fare. The depot was crowded with people seeking work, all huddled under the overhang to escape the rain. Ethan made his way to the bulletin board, scanning the job postings. Movement near the vending machines caught his eye. A teenage boy stood there, soaked to the skin, counting coins in his palm. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his thin jacket offered little protection from the cold. Something about the way he kept recounting the same handful of change made Ethan's chest tighten. Without thinking too hard about it, Ethan reached into his pocket and felt the $5 bill there, his last money until payday. The boy looked up as Ethan approached, revealing warm brown eyes and a face that tried to hide its hunger behind dignity. "Hey there," Ethan said carefully. "You looking to get something to eat?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir, but I'm afraid I'm a bit short." "I'm Ethan. Let me help you out." He stepped forward and fed his $5 into the machine, then gestured to the selection. "Pick whatever you'd like." "Oh no, I couldn't." The boy started to protest, but his stomach growled loudly enough for both to hear. "Go on," Ethan encouraged. "I've been there before. Sometimes we all need a little help." The boy selected a sandwich, and Ethan added a hot chocolate to the order. "Thank you, sir, Ethan. I'm Ben." Ethan pulled his thermos from his work bag. "Here, let's sit down and share what we've got. I've got coffee and another sandwich we can split." They found a bench away from the crowd. Ben's hand shook slightly as he unwrapped the sandwich, but he took small, measured bites despite his obvious hunger. His manners and the way he held himself suggested good breeding, making Ethan wonder about his story. "This is very kind of you," Ben said between careful bites. Ethan shrugged, breaking his bologna sandwich in half. "We've got to look out for each other, right?" They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the rain creating a curtain around their little corner of the depot. Ben sipped the hot chocolate, color slowly returning to his cold, pinched cheeks. "Dad." Ethan looked up to see Lily running toward them, her rainbow umbrella bobbing through the crowd. She must have gotten dropped off for choir practice early. "Hey, sweetie!" He caught her in a one-armed hug as she crashed into him. "This is Ben. Ben, this is my daughter Lily." "Hi!" Lily beamed, extending her hand like they'd practiced. As she did, her sleeve pulled back, revealing the colorful woven bracelet on her wrist. Ben's eyes widened slightly. "That's a beautiful bracelet," he said, leaning forward to look closer. "My mother used to make ones just like that." "Really?" Lily touched the bracelet proudly. "My mom brought it back from her trip. She said the ladies there weave them for peace and friendship." Something flickered across Ben's face, recognition, perhaps, or memory, but it was gone just as quickly, replaced by a warm smile. "They do indeed." A bus pulled up to the curb, its brakes hissing in the wet morning air. Ben stood quickly, gathering his empty wrapper and cup. "Thank you again, Ethan, for everything." He glanced at Lily. "It was lovely to meet you both." Before either Cole could respond, Ben had slipped into the crowd, boarding the bus. Ethan watched as the vehicle pulled away, carrying the mysterious boy with it. The rain continued to fall, washing away any trace that their paths had ever crossed. "He seemed nice," Lily said, still holding Ethan's hand. "I hope he gets somewhere warm and dry." "Me too, sweetheart." Ethan squeezed her hand, thinking of the $5 he no longer had, but somehow couldn't bring himself to regret spending. "Me too." The kitchen in Ethan's apartment filled with the warm, buttery smell of grilled cheese sandwiches sizzling in the pan. He flipped one carefully, watching the golden brown crust form just the way Lily liked it. Outside, the evening sky had turned a deep gray, threatening another round of rain. "Hey, Dad," Lily called from the living room. "Can I turn on the TV while you cook?" "Sure, sweetheart. Just keep it down, okay? Mrs. Martinez downstairs has that early shift tomorrow." The familiar jingle of the local news filled their small apartment. Ethan smiled to himself, remembering how his daughter had recently declared she wanted to be a news reporter or maybe an astronaut chef. He slid the first sandwich onto a plate, adding a handful of baby carrots on the side. In other news, the anchor's voice carried over to the kitchen. Cincinnati Children's Hospital received a special visitor today as part of. "Dad?" Lily's shriek nearly made Ethan drop the spatula. "Dad, come quick, look!" Something in her voice made him turn down the burner. He wiped his hands on a dish towel and hurried to the living room. "What's wrong, Lil?" Lily sat cross-legged on their worn carpet, pointing at the screen with wide eyes. "It's him! It's the boy from the bus station!" Ethan's mouth fell open as the camera panned across a hospital corridor. There, surrounded by a small entourage of suited men and women, stood the same teenager he'd shared his lunch with yesterday. But instead of the rain-soaked jacket and worn jeans, the boy now wore an impeccable navy suit with gold buttons and a small ceremonial sash across his chest. "Prince Benjamin Al-Rahim of Kamar," the reporter was saying, continuing his country's tradition of supporting children's medical initiatives worldwide. The 14-year-old heir to the throne spoke with patience and staff. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Ethan reached for the back of the couch to steady himself. On screen, Ben, Prince Benjamin, smiled that same warm smile as he knelt to chat with a young patient in a wheelchair. His voice, when he spoke to the camera, carried the same gentle tone that had thanked Ethan for sharing his lunch. "We are honored to continue our partnership with Cincinnati Children's Hospital," the prince was saying. "Every child deserves access to excellent medical care, regardless of their circumstances." "Dad!" Lily bounced on her toes, her homework completely forgotten. "That's our Ben, the one who liked my bracelet. He's a real prince." She thrust her wrist toward the TV, the colorful woven band catching the light. "See, he recognized it yesterday because it's from his country." The smell of burning bread suddenly cut through Ethan's daze. "The sandwich?" He rushed back to the kitchen, lifting the smoking pan off the burner. The bread had blackened beyond saving. As he scraped the ruined sandwich into the trash, his mind raced. He'd given his last $5 to a prince, split his bologna sandwich with royalty. The absurdity of it made him want to laugh and sit down at the same time. "Can we call the hospital?" Lily appeared at his elbow, practically vibrating with excitement. "Maybe they'll let us see him again. I want to tell him I loved the way he helped that little girl with the IV stand walk to the window. That's just like what Mom used to do." Ethan's throat tightened at the mention of his late wife. "Honey, I don't think we can just call up a prince. He's probably very busy with important meetings," and he trailed off, remembering how Ben had sat on that hard depot bench, talking about comic books and his favorite subjects in school. Nothing about him had suggested palace halls or royal protocols. Back in the living room, the news had moved on to weather reports. Lily remained glued to the screen, as if expecting Ben to reappear at any moment. Outside, the first drops of rain began to tap against the windows. "Dad?" Lily's voice had grown quieter. "Do you think he remembered us? When he was being all princely at the hospital?" Ethan thought about the genuine gratitude in Ben's eyes when he'd accepted half a simple bologna sandwich, about how the boy had listened intently to Lily's quick explanation of her choir practice before she'd run off to catch her ride. "I think he did, sweetheart." Ethan reached for the remote and turned off the TV. The sudden silence felt heavy with the weight of their discovery. "I think he remembered." The rain picked up outside, drumming a steady rhythm against the fire escape. Ethan stood there, remote still in hand, trying to process how his small act of kindness had unknowingly crossed paths with a prince. Not just any prince, but one who had chosen to sit in a bus depot, accepting a stranger's simple lunch with genuine appreciation. The burning smell still lingered in the kitchen. "How about we start over with that grilled cheese?" he finally said, needing something normal to do with his hands. "Can I help?" Lily asked, already heading for the bread box. "I'll make sure you don't burn it this time." Ethan smiled, grateful for his daughter's ability to take even the most surprising revelations in stride. As he pulled out a new pan, he found himself wondering what other surprises might be waiting around the corner in their quiet life in Riverside. The rain continued to fall outside their windows, steady and soft, while inside, father and daughter began again on their simple dinner, the news of their royal encounter settling around them like an unexpected gift. The morning sun struggled to break through lingering clouds as Ethan packed Lily's lunch. His daughter sat at their small kitchen table, her school tablet propped against the cereal box while she chatted between spoonfuls of off-brand cornflakes. And then Ben smiled just like this. "See, Dad?" Lily turned the tablet to show him the selfie for what felt like the 100th time since yesterday. "Right after you went to get napkins. He said my bracelet was pretty, and I told him how Mom brought it back from helping people." Ethan paused, sandwich half wrapped. In the photo, Ben's eyes weren't focused on the camera, but rather on the colorful woven bracelet on Lily's wrist, the same bracelet Sarah had brought home from her medical relief mission 5 years ago. "What exactly did he say about the bracelet, honey?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice casual as he finished packing her lunch. Lily scrunched up her face in concentration. "He said it looked like ones his mother used to make." "Oh, and he knew the pattern had something to do with peace." "I remember because that's what Mom always said too." Ethan glanced at the clock. 6:45 a.m. The library wouldn't open for another couple hours, but he had the morning off while waiting for a callback about a repair job. "Ready for school, kiddo?" He handed Lily her lunch bag. "I'll walk you today." The morning air felt crisp and clean after yesterday's rain. They walked the 4 blocks to Riverside Elementary, Lily skipping ahead occasionally to splash in leftover puddles. Her bracelet caught the morning light, its intricate pattern of blues and golds still vibrant after all these years. After dropping Lily off, Ethan headed straight to the Riverside Public Library. Mrs. Chen, the morning librarian, greeted him with a warm smile as she unlocked the heavy doors at precisely 9 a.m. "Early bird today, Mr. Cole?" "Research project?" he replied, managing a small smile. "Mind if I use one of the computers?" The library's ancient desktop took several minutes to boot up. Ethan drummed his fingers on the desk, remembering Sarah's excitement when she'd returned from Kamar. She'd brought back several of the bracelets sewn for Lily, one for herself and one she'd given to her mother. "They're more than just pretty patterns," she'd explained. "Each design tells a story." His first search for Kamar weaving patterns brought up thousands of results. He narrowed it down. Kamar peace bracelet weaving. The images loaded slowly, but there it was, the exact pattern of Lily's bracelet, down to the distinctive diamond shapes between the waves of color. The article headline read, "Traditional Peace Weaves of Al-Mashra Village." Ethan leaned closer to the screen, reading carefully. The intricate pattern had originated in a small mountain village, where local women had begun weaving the bracelets during peace talks between rival families decades ago. The design incorporated symbols of unity and healing. In recent years, the article continued, the Al-Mashra Peace Weave has gained international recognition through relief efforts following the coastal hurricanes. Queen Amira herself has promoted the pattern as a symbol of Kamar's commitment to humanitarian causes. Queen Amira Bin's mother. Ethan opened another tab, searching for Sarah's relief mission. The photos loaded. Teams of doctors and nurses working in temporary clinics. His breath caught when he found a group shot. There was Sarah, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, helping distribute supplies. In the background, barely visible but unmistakable, stood a woman in a headscarf demonstrating the bracelet weave to a group of aid workers. The timestamp matched 5 years ago, just months before the accident that took Sarah away from them. She'd spent 2 weeks in that village, treating children and elderly residents affected by the storms. The people there have so little, she'd written in her journal, but they share everything. They taught me more about healing than medical school ever did. Ethan clicked back to the photo of Lily and Ben at the bus station. There was something in the boy's expression as he looked at the bracelet, a flash of recognition, maybe even loss. The article had mentioned Queen Amira's recent passing, how the young prince had stepped up to continue her humanitarian work. His fingers traced the image of Lily's bracelet on the screen. Such a small thing, really just threads woven together in an ancient pattern. Yet somehow it connected his late wife, his daughter, and a young prince who'd shared his sandwich in the rain. Mrs. Chen's voice startled him from his thoughts. "Finding what you need, Mr. Cole?" He nodded, still staring at the images before him. This strange connection felt both impossible and completely real, like a conversation crossing years and continents, spoken in the quiet language of colored threads and simple kindness. The dishes from their simple dinner of mac and cheese were still soaking in the sink when Ethan's phone buzzed. He dried his hands on the worn dish towel and fished the device from his pocket, expecting another message from the temp agency about tomorrow's shift. Instead, a notification from the church's Facebook page popped up. Ethan rarely checked social media. Ruth, their deacon, had insisted he join the church's private group to keep up with choir schedules for Lily. He tapped the message icon, and his breath caught as he read the sender's name. Asha Rahim, Royal Delegation of Kamar. "Dad?" Lily looked up from her homework at the kitchen table. "You okay? Your face got all funny." "I'm fine, sweetheart." Ethan lowered himself into the chair across from her, eyes fixed on the screen as he read. "Dear Mr. Cole, I hope this message finds you well. My name is Asha Rahim, and I serve as cultural attaché to Prince Benjamin's delegation. We noticed the lovely photograph your daughter shared on your church's page." His heart skipped. The selfie. Of course, Lily had posted it yesterday, excited to show her choir friend. "The prince was deeply moved by your kindness at the bus depot. He has spoken of little else these past 2 days. Before we depart Ohio next week, His Highness would very much like to thank you and your daughter properly, in private, away from media attention. Would you be willing to meet with Prince Benjamin? We can arrange any time and location that suits your schedule. With sincere gratitude, Asha Rahim, Office of Royal Relations, Kingdom of Kamar." Ethan set the phone down and rubbed his temples. The fluorescent kitchen light hummed overhead as his mind raced. A private meeting with royalty? Him? A temp worker who could barely make rent? "What is it, Dad?" Lily asked, her math homework forgotten. "Nothing important, honey. Just a work thing." The lie felt heavy on his tongue, but he needed time to think. Lily narrowed her eyes, looking so much like her mother that it made his chest ache. "You're doing that thing where you scrunch your eyebrows together. That means it's something big." Ethan managed a small smile. "When did you get so good at reading me?" "Mom always said you were like an open book." Lily grinned. "At least to us." The mention of Sarah made Ethan's throat tight. He glanced at their family photo on the wall, taken at the church picnic just months before the accident. Sarah would have known exactly what to do about this situation. She never shied away from anything. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Ms. Rahim. "Please know that Prince Benjamin specifically requested this be kept informal. He was touched by your genuine kindness, given freely without knowing his identity. Such moments are rare in his life." Ethan's finger hovered over the keyboard. Part of him wanted to decline politely. He wasn't comfortable with attention, never had been. What would people say? The guys at the factory already gave him enough grief about being a single dad. If word got out about this. "Dad?" Lily's voice pulled him back. "Is it about Ben?" He looked up, startled. "How did you—" "I saw the church page name on your phone." She set down her pencil. "Did he message us? Can we see him again?" The hope in her eyes made his chest tight. Since Sarah died, genuine excitement had been rare for Lily. She'd been so strong, so grown up about everything. But now she looked every bit the 10-year-old she was, practically bouncing in her chair. His office reached out, Ethan admitted carefully. They asked if we'd like to meet him, privately. Lily's eyes went wide. Really? Oh my gosh, Dad, we have to go. Please? Hold on, sweetie, it's complicated. Why? He's so nice. Remember how he told that funny story about the camel at the bus stop? And he liked my bracelet, and… Lily. Ethan's gentle tone made her pause. This isn't just meeting a friend. He's a prince. There would be security and protocols, and… But they said private, right? No cameras or anything? Well, yes, but… Then what's wrong? Lily's face fell slightly. Is it because of work? Because of what Mr. Clint says about keeping our heads down? Ethan winced. His daughter was too perceptive sometimes. Clint, his sometime supervisor at the factory, was always warning him about making waves. Stay quiet, stay invisible, keep the job. The unspoken rules of survival? No, honey, it's not that. Ethan reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I just want to think it through. Make sure it's the right thing. Mom would say yes. Lily's voice was quiet but certain. She always said kindness should be answered with kindness. Sarah's words, coming from their daughter's mouth, hit him like a physical touch. He looked at Lily, really looked at her. The same gentle determination Sarah had shown every day in her nursing work shone in their daughter's eyes. Let me sleep on it, he said finally. We'll talk more tomorrow, okay? Lily nodded, but her expression remained hopeful. Promise you'll really think about it? Promise. Ethan managed a small smile. Now finish that math homework. As Lily bent back over her textbook, Ethan glanced again at his phone. The message waited for his response, its cursor blinking steadily. His daughter's words echoed in his mind. Kindness should be answered with kindness. Maybe Sarah had known something he was still learning. The Friday morning sun hadn't yet burned through the fog when Ethan punched his time card at the plant. The familiar whir of machinery and smell of metal shavings filled the air as he made his way to his workstation. He'd barely slipped on his safety glasses when Clint Darden's voice cut through the industrial noise. Cole, my office, now. Ethan's stomach tightened. In 15 years at the plant, he'd never been called to the foreman's office this early. He followed Clint's broad back down the narrow corridor, past the break room where a few workers watched them pass with curious eyes. The office was cramped, with pale yellow walls covered in safety notices and production charts. Clint settled into his creaking desk chair while Ethan stood, hands in his coverall pockets. Hear you've been making some interesting friends lately, Clint said, leaning back. His carefully casual tone didn't match the sharp look in his eyes. Sir? Don't play dumb, Cole. The whole town's talking about your little charity case at the bus depot. The one that turned out to be some foreign prince. Clint drummed his thick fingers on the desk. That kind of thing draws attention we don't need. Ethan kept his voice steady. I just helped someone who was hungry. Didn't know who he was. Maybe. Clint's chair squeaked as he leaned forward. But now there's talk about palace staff reaching out, setting up meetings, reporters sniffing around. People around here don't like that kind of stir. I haven't talked to any reporters. Keep it that way. Clint stood up, his bulk filling the small space. This is a working town, Cole. Simple folks. They don't take kindly to someone getting above themselves. Especially not with foreign royalty involved. The implied threat hung in the air like the dust motes dancing in the fluorescent light. Ethan thought of Lily's excited face when she'd seen the palace message, of the strange connection through her mother's bracelet. But Clint wasn't finished. Got a lot of people depending on this plant staying steady. Orders to fill. Can't have distractions. He moved to the door. Stay out of trouble, Cole. That's friendly advice. The morning dragged by in a blur of measurements and metal. During his lunch break, Ethan walked to the vending machines, the same ones he visited every day. Today felt different. Conversations died as he approached. Eyes darted away. Near the coffee machine, Jerry from shipping was talking to two newer workers. Their voices carried clearly in the concrete space. Awful. Convenient, don't you think? Guy just happens to give away his last $5 to some kid who turns out to be loaded? Jerry snorted. Probably staged the whole thing, looking for his 15 minutes. Or a handout, one of the others added. Bet the palace pays well for good PR. Ethan's appetite vanished. He turned away, leaving his lunch unopened in his locker. The afternoon stretched endless. filled with sideways glances and whispered conversations that stopped when he walked by. At quitting time, he changed quickly and headed out, wanting to avoid another run-in with Clint. Dark clouds had rolled in, matching his mood. Main Street was busy with the usual Friday traffic, but something had changed. The familiar faces of shopkeepers and regulars now held suspicion. Outside the diner, where he sometimes treated Lily to Saturday breakfast, Mrs. Henderson was talking to the banker, Mr. Phillips. Taking advantage, if you ask me. Mrs. Henderson's words drifted clearly. Using that poor foreign boy for attention? Some people have no shame. The chill that ran through Ethan had nothing to do with the weather. These were people he'd known for years. People who'd sent casseroles when Sarah died, who'd watched Lily grow up. Now they looked at him like he was a stranger. Worse, like he was someone who couldn't be trusted. He walked faster, past the church where Lily would be finishing choir practice soon, past the hardware store where he'd helped Mr. Wilson fix his register last month. Every familiar landmark now felt tainted by the whispers and sidelong glances. A drop of rain hit his cheek, then another. The clouds above had darkened to the color of old bruises. But the real cold came from inside, from the realization that one simple act of kindness had somehow marked him as different, suspicious, other, the same way some folks had looked at Sarah when she'd come back from her relief work in Kamar, full of stories about the people she'd met, the lives she'd touched. The rain began falling in earnest as Ethan turned onto his street. His shoulders were damp, but he barely noticed. His mind was full of Clint's warnings, the muttered accusations, and the sudden distance in familiar faces. What had started as a simple moment of sharing food with a hungry kid had somehow turned into something bigger, something that threatened the careful life he'd built for Lily. A gust of wind drove the rain harder, and Ethan hunched his shoulders against it. But it wasn't the weather that made him shiver as he climbed the steps to his apartment. It was the weight of eyes he could feel, watching, judging, waiting for him to make a wrong move. The key stuck in the lock, just like it always did. But today, that small, familiar frustration felt like one more sign that his world was shifting beneath his feet, turning the simple into complicated, the routine into risk. He got the door open and stepped inside, leaving the dark clouds and darker whispers outside. For now, a mentor's wisdom. The old church bells chimed 3 o'clock as Ethan guided his pickup into the cracked parking lot of First Methodist. Saturday afternoon choir practice had become their weekly routine since Sarah passed, giving Lily something steady to hold on to. The familiar red brick building stood solid against the autumn sky, its stained glass windows catching the afternoon light. Lily hopped out, her choir folder clutched to her chest. "See you in an hour, Dad." She skipped up the worn concrete steps, her sneakers making little tapping sounds. Instead of heading home to tackle the growing pile of bills on his kitchen table, Ethan found himself walking through the heavy wooden doors. The smell of furniture polish and old hymnals wrapped around him like a familiar blanket. Down the hallway, children's voices lifted in song, working through Amazing Grace with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Deacon Ruth Alvarez sat at her usual spot in the church office, addressing envelopes for the food pantry newsletter. Her silver hair was pulled back in its everyday bun, reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up as Ethan's shadow crossed her doorway. "Well, if it isn't our local celebrity," she said with a warm smile. "Come in, Ethan. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on those shoulders." Ethan sank into the worn armchair across from her desk. "That obvious, huh? I've known you since Lily was in diapers. You get this little wrinkle right here." She tapped between her eyebrows. "When something's eating at you." The afternoon sun filtered through the dusty window, casting patterns on Ruth's desk calendar. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "The palace reached out. They want Lily and me to meet with Prince Ben before he leaves Ohio." "Ah." Ruth set down her pen. "And this is troubling you because you haven't heard the whispers around town? Or seen what they're saying online?" Ethan's voice came out rougher than he intended. "According to half of Riverside, I'm either running some kind of scam or trying to get my 15 minutes of fame." Ruth's eyes softened. "Since when do you care what people whisper?" "Since Clint pulled me aside yesterday to warn me about stirring up trouble. Since someone at the diner yesterday loudly wondered if I was on the Saudi payroll. They can't even get the country right." He rubbed his face. "I just wanted to help a hungry kid. That's all it was." "And that's exactly why this matters," Ruth said quietly. She pushed aside her envelopes and folded her hands on the desk. Ethan Cole, when God hands you a microphone, you sing about grace. I'm not looking for a microphone. No, but you've been given one all the same. Ruth's voice held the gentle authority that had guided countless souls through difficult times. Sometimes the Lord works in ways we don't expect. That $5 and half a sandwich? That was you being you, the same man who helps Miss Peterson with her groceries and fixes the Wilson boys' bikes for free. Through the walls, they could hear the children starting another hymn. Lily's clear voice rose above the others for a moment, and Ethan's heart squeezed. I just don't want Lily caught up in some media circus, he admitted. She's been through enough. Ruth nodded thoughtfully. Let me ask you something. What message does it send Lily if her father hides from doing the right thing because some people might talk? What does it teach her about standing firm in her beliefs? Ethan sat back, letting her words sink in. The sun had shifted, throwing longer shadows across the office floor. Think about it, Ruth continued. That young prince left his security detail to walk among ordinary people. He wanted something real, and he found it in a simple act of kindness from a working man who gave what he had. She smiled. Sounds almost biblical, doesn't it? Despite himself, Ethan felt a small smile tugging at his lips. I wouldn't go that far. The point is, Lily watches everything you do. She's learning how to face challenges by watching how you face them. Ruth's eyes crinkled. And that child has a heart big enough to change the world, just like her mama did. Don't let fear dim that light. The choir's practice was winding down. They could hear Miss Andrea giving final instructions. Soon, Lily would come bouncing down the hall, full of stories about the day's rehearsal. So what should I do? Ethan asked, though he was beginning to see the answer. Meet with the prince. Show Lily that kindness stands tall, even when people try to twist it. Show her that her daddy isn't afraid to be exactly who he is, a good man who helps where he can. Ruth reached across the desk and patted his hand. The rest will sort itself out. Ethan nodded slowly, feeling something settle in his chest even as his stomach churned with anxiety. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. Ruth beamed. That's the Ethan Cole I know. She picked up her pen again. Now, will you be at the food pantry tomorrow? We could use those strong arms for the canned goods delivery. Before Ethan could answer, Lily's voice rang down the hallway. Dad! Dad! We learned a new song today! The gleaming glass doors of the Riverside Grand Hotel felt worlds away from Ethan's usual Sunday afternoon routine of fixing things around the apartment. He smoothed down his only dress shirt, freshly ironed but showing its age at the collar, and squeezed Lily's hand. Her white church dress swished as she bounced on her toes, barely containing her excitement. Remember what we talked about, honey, Ethan said quietly. Best behavior. I know, Dad, Lily whispered back, though her eyes sparkled with barely contained energy. Like when Pastor Mike's wife comes for dinner. The lobby stretched out before them in cream marble and soft lighting. A young woman in a navy blazer approached them with a warm smile. Mr. Cole, I'm Sarah from the delegation. Please follow me. They rode the elevator in silence to the 4th floor. The thick carpet muffled their footsteps as Sarah led them down a hallway to a corner suite. She knocked softly, and a gentle voice called, Enter, please. The suite sitting room was bathed in afternoon sunlight. Near the window stood a woman in her early 50s, wearing an elegant blue dress and a patterned silk scarf. Her dark eyes crinkled warmly as she smiled. Mr. Cole, Miss Lily, welcome. I am Asha Rahim, Minister of Culture and Ben's aunt. Her English carried just a hint of an accent. Please, come sit. I've ordered tea and some treats I think you might enjoy. Ethan guided Lily to one of the cream-colored sofas. A silver tea service gleamed on the coffee table, surrounded by plates of cookies and small sandwiches. Lily's eyes went wide at the fancy setup. Thank you for meeting with us, Minister, Ethan said, perching carefully on the edge of the sofa. Please, call me Asha. She poured tea into delicate cups, adding milk to Lily's without being asked. Sugar for you, Mr. Cole? Just Ethan is fine. And no thank you. As Asha handed them their cups, her gaze caught on Lily's wrist. The colorful woven bracelet stood out against her white dress sleeve. Asha's breath caught slightly. May I? She asked, gesturing to Lily's arm. Lily nodded, extending her wrist. Asha's fingers traced the pattern gently. This weave, I know it well. It's from my village, Madinat al-Salam. The pattern represents dignity and peace. She looked up at Ethan, her eyes bright with recognition. Your wife? She was Sarah Cole, wasn't she? The nurse who came after the hurricane? Ethan's hands tightened around his teacup. You knew Sarah? She spent 3 weeks in our village clinic. Such kindness in her eyes, such gentle hands with our children. Asha smiled softly. The grandmothers taught her to weave these bracelets while she was there. They said her spirit was as bright as our desert sun. Lily leaned forward, nearly spilling her tea. You knew my mom? Did she help lots of people? Oh yes, little one. She helped deliver babies, treated the elderly, played games with the children while they recovered. Asha's voice grew warm with memory. She told us about her beautiful daughter back home, how she couldn't wait to teach her the piece weave pattern. Ethan swallowed hard, remembering Sarah's joy when she returned home, her suitcase full of colorful thread and stories of the village women who had become like sisters to her. The bracelet had been Lily's most treasured possession since Sarah's passing 3 years ago. The patterns your mother learned, Aisha continued. They inspired our current food dignity program. She wrote in her journal about how important it was to help people while honoring their pride. She met Ethan's eyes. When Ben told me about your kindness at the bus station, how you shared your meal with such respect, it was like hearing Sarah's words come alive again. The door burst open suddenly, making them all jump. Ben stood there, grinning widely, his formal clothes replaced by jeans and a sweater. Lily! Mr. Cole! Before anyone could stop her, Lily launched herself across the room. Ben caught her in a big hug, both of them laughing. I knew it was really you at the bus station, Lily exclaimed. Dad said I wasn't seeing things on TV. The warm scent of vanilla and butter filled the church hall kitchen as Mrs. Peterson, the head of the choir ladies, arranged another plate of chocolate chip cookies. Ethan watched in amazement as Ben, still dressed in his formal suit but with the tie loosened, happily munched his third cookie while chatting with Lily about their favorite desserts. These are incredible, Ben said, reaching for another cookie. American baking is so different from what we have at home. Asha smiled warmly at Mrs. Peterson. My nephew has quite the sweet tooth. I'm afraid the palace chefs never quite mastered chocolate chip cookies. Well then, you just haven't had the right recipe, Mrs. Peterson declared, her gray curls bouncing as she nodded. Every child deserves good cookies. Lily perched on a stool next to Ben, her feet swinging. The choir ladies make the best treats for after practice. Sometimes we get brownies too. Speaking of the choir, Asha said, setting down her teacup, this hall has such wonderful acoustics, much more welcoming than the formal reception rooms we've been using. Ben's eyes lit up. Aunt Asha, what if we did the thank you here instead of at the hotel? It feels more like, he paused, searching for the right words. More like that morning at the bus station. Ethan felt his shoulders relax at the suggestion. The thought of navigating a fancy hotel ballroom had been keeping him up at night. That's actually a wonderful idea, Asha said. We could have a proper community meal, much more meaningful than those stuffy formal affairs. Could the choir sing? Lily asked, practically bouncing in her seat. We just learned a new song about friendship. Mrs. Peterson wiped her hands on her apron. I'm sure Deacon Ruth would love that. The children have been working so hard on their harmonies. And could we have pancakes? Ben asked eagerly. I tried them at a diner yesterday. They were amazing with all that syrup. Ethan couldn't help but chuckle. Pancakes for dinner? Why not? Asha's eyes twinkled. Sometimes the best traditions are the unexpected ones. Mrs. Peterson was already reaching for her recipe box. Oh, we could do a breakfast for dinner theme. The ladies would love that. We'll make our special fluffy pancakes and Sally's famous breakfast casserole. The kitchen burst into cheerful planning. Lily and Ben huddled over a piece of paper, drawing up their ideal menu while Mrs. Peterson called other choir ladies. Asha stepped aside to make some calls of her own, speaking quietly in Arabic to what Ethan assumed were palace officials. Mr. Cole, Ben said suddenly, looking up from his pancake drawings, will you help flip the pancakes? I want to learn how. I'd be honored, Your Highness, Ethan replied. Please, just Ben, the boy said quickly, at least when we're having pancakes. Asha rejoined them, slipping her phone into her pocket. Well, that's settled. The security team will do a check of the hall tomorrow, but they agree this is a perfect venue. Much easier to secure than the hotel, actually. Mrs. Peterson clapped her hands. Wonderful. I'll call Deacon Ruth right now. We'll need to practice extra hard this week, won't we, Lily? Lily nodded solemnly. We'll make it perfect. No need for perfect, Ben said, reaching for another cookie. Just real. The evening wrapped up with more cookies, laughter, and planning. The choir ladies arrived one by one, each bringing new suggestions and excitement. Ben tried every type of cookie, declaring each one better than the last. Lily taught him the hand motions to their choir song. As the sky darkened outside, Asha checked her watch. "We should head back to the hotel. Ben has an early meeting tomorrow." Ben groaned but stood up, brushing cookie crumbs from his suit. "Thank you for the cookies, Mrs. Peterson. They're better than any I've had in 3 continents." Mrs. Peterson beamed, pressing a bag of extra cookies into his hands. "You come back for more any time, young man. Prince or no prince, growing boys need cookies." The group walked out to the parking lot together. The spring evening was mild, with stars just beginning to peek through the clouds. Security personnel materialized from discreet positions, keeping a respectful distance. "This was wonderful," Asha said, hugging Lily. "We'll see you both on Thursday for the dinner?" "Wouldn't miss it," Ethan replied, "though I might need some pancake flipping practice before then." Ben grinned. "Me too. Maybe we can learn together." The royal party drove away in their sleek black cars, while Ethan and Lily walked to their old pickup truck. Lily climbed into the passenger seat, still humming one of the choir songs. "Did you have fun, sweetheart?" Ethan asked, starting the engine. "Mm-hmm," Lily murmured, already drowsy from cookies and excitement. "Ben's nice, just like a regular kid." "Yeah, he is," Ethan agreed softly. By the time they turned onto their street, Lily was fast asleep, her head resting against the window. The moonlight caught the threads of her bracelet, the bracelet that had somehow connected them to a prince and his aunt, to memories of her mother, to an evening of cookies and simple plans. Ethan drove through the quiet streets, a small smile playing on his lips. For the first time in a long while, tomorrow felt like something to look forward to. The middle. The industrial hum of machinery filled the plant as Ethan worked methodically, his wrench clicking against metal in a steady rhythm. Morning light filtered through the high windows, catching dust motes that danced above the assembly line. He'd been at it since 6, trying to lose himself in the familiar routine of maintenance checks and bolt tightening. A burst of static from Clint's radio cut through the mechanical drone. The foreman always kept it tuned to WKRX, that local talk station that specialized in stirring up controversy. Usually, Ethan just tuned it out, but today, something caught his attention. "So folks, let's talk about this royal circus coming to town," the radio host's nasally voice drawled. "You heard about this beggar dad who's suddenly best friends with some foreign prince?" Ethan's wrench slipped, nearly catching his finger. His jaw tightened as he tried to focus on the bolt in front of him. "I mean, come on, people," the host continued, his tone dripping with mockery. "Guy can't make rent, but he's handing out cash to strangers? And oh, what do you know? Turns out the stranger's loaded. Talk about hitting the publicity jackpot." Laughter crackled through the radio speakers. Ethan could feel eyes on him from around the plant floor. His neck burned. "And now they're throwing him some fancy dinner? Please. We all know what this is about. Handouts from rich foreigners who think throwing money at photo ops makes them look good." Clint turned the volume up slightly, shooting a pointed look in Ethan's direction. A few workers nearby snickered. "I've got nothing against charity cases," the host went on, "but let's call this what it is. These people are using some down-on-his-luck dad for their PR campaign. Probably got a nice fat check waiting for him, too." The wrench trembled in Ethan's hand. He wanted to march over and shut that radio off, to tell them all how wrong they were. But that would only make things worse. Instead, he gripped his tools tighter and kept working, trying to block out the voices. "Hey, Cole," Clint called out during lunch break, his tone falsely casual. "Getting measured for your fancy new suit yet? Maybe they'll let you keep it after the show's over." Several workers laughed. Ethan stabbed at his sandwich, keeping his eyes down. "Just looking out for you," Clint continued, leaning against a workbench. "People around here don't take kindly to folks who think they're better than everyone else. Getting mixed up with royalty? That's asking for trouble." "I gave a hungry kid half my lunch," Ethan said quietly, still not looking up. "That's all it was." Sure, Clint smirked. "And now you're going to be on TV, playing best buddies with some prince. Real convenient how that worked out." The rest of the day dragged by in a fog of whispered comments and pointed looks. By the time Ethan clocked out, shame and anger had twisted into a tight knot in his stomach. Maybe Clint was right. Maybe this whole dinner was a mistake. He could call Asha, make some excuse about being sick. Better to fade back into anonymity than become even more of a target. The house was quiet when he got home, except for the sound of Lily's voice drifting from her room. She was practicing the hymn her choir would perform at the dinner, her clear young voice full of joy and hope. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Ethan stood in the hallway, listening. He remembered how her eyes had lit up when they planned the dinner, how she'd hugged Ben like they'd been friends forever. There wasn't a trace of judgment or cynicism in her, just pure happiness at making new friends and sharing music. That saved a wretch like me. She hit a wrong note, stopped, then started the phrase again with careful determination. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the simple melody wash over him. His daughter's voice, so earnest and clear, seemed to cut through all the toxic noise of the day. I once was lost, but now am found. The knot in his stomach began to loosen. What was he teaching Lily if he let fear and other people's spite drive him away from doing what he knew was right? She saw the good in this situation, the chance to share kindness and friendship. Maybe he needed to try seeing it through her eyes. Was blind, but now I see. The late afternoon sun slanted through the stained glass windows of Riverside Community Church, painting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden floors. Ethan shifted the paper bag of dinner rolls in his arms as he pushed open the heavy side door, the familiar scent of lemon polish and old hymnals greeting him. "Hello," his voice echoed in the quiet sanctuary. "Deacon Ruth?" "Back here in the fellowship hall," Ruth's warm voice called out. Ethan followed the sound, his work boots squeaking against the freshly waxed floor. He found Ruth standing at a long folding table, carefully arranging what looked like dozens of handwritten notes around a large glass jar. Her silver hair was pulled back in its usual neat bun, and she wore one of her trademark hand-knit cardigans despite the warm spring evening. "Just dropping off these rolls for tomorrow's dinner," Ethan said, placing the bag on a nearby chair. Ruth looked up with a bright smile. "Perfect timing. Come see what's happening here." As Ethan moved closer, he could read the hand-lettered sign propped against the jar. 5 Kindness Challenge. Inside, he spotted several crisp $5 bills. "What's all this?" he asked, picking up one of the notes scattered across the table. "It started after people heard about what you did for Prince Ben," Ruth explained, smoothing her cardigan. Folks began sharing their own stories of times when a small kindness made a big difference in their lives. Then someone suggested we start collecting $5 at a time to help others in need. Ethan read the note in his hand. The handwriting was shaky but clear. "Lost my job in '82, couldn't afford gas to get to interviews. Station attendant filled my tank and said, 'Pay it forward someday.' Never forgot that. Here's my 5, Mary Wilson." "Read this one," Ruth said, handing him another slip of paper. "It came in this morning. My little girl needed medicine." Ethan read aloud. "The pharmacist covered the copay when my card was declined. Said his mom had done the same for someone once. That was 15 years ago. Still makes me cry thinking about it." Ruth nodded, arranging more notes. People keep bringing them in, some with donations, some just wanting to share their stories. The jar's been filled and emptied 3 times this week already. The fellowship hall door creaked open, and a tall man in a faded army jacket stepped in. Ethan recognized him as Joe Martinez, who often attended the early service. "Evening, Deacon Ruth," Joe said, approaching the table. "Wanted to add my bit to the collection." He pulled out a worn leather wallet and carefully extracted a $5 bill. "Joe served 2 tours in Afghanistan," Ruth explained to Ethan. "He's been helping coordinate our veterans' food pantry." Joe smoothed the bill before dropping it in the jar. "You know what you did for that boy, Prince or not? It hit home for some of us vets." He cleared his throat. "Reminded me of my first week back stateside. Couldn't sleep, couldn't settle. Found myself at a diner at 3 a.m., realized I'd left my wallet at home. Waitress brought me coffee anyway, sat and talked for an hour." He touched the jar gently. "Sometimes it's not even about the money. It's knowing somebody sees you as a person, you know? You reminded me people still care." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "I just shared my lunch," he said quietly. Ruth touched his arm. "Sometimes that's all it takes. Look at this one." She handed him another note. "Lost my husband last year," Ethan read. "Neighbor boy's been mowing my lawn every week. Won't take payment. Says his grandpa taught him to help widows. I'm putting 5 in for every week he's helped, Mrs. Chen." More notes caught his eye. A teacher who bought shoes for a student. A bus driver who paid a stranger's fare. A grocery clerk who covered a mother's shortfall. Countless small moments of grace, written in different hands but telling the same story. How a little kindness could light up someone's darkest day. "The mayor's wife brought in 20 stories this morning," Ruth said, straightening a pile of papers. "Said she's never seen anything unite the town quite like this." Joe nodded. "People are talking about it at the VFW too. Good talk. for a change, not the usual grumbling. Ethan picked up another note, this one written in careful cursive. 1,975 flat tire in the rain. Young man changed it, wouldn't take money, said his mama raised him right. I was pregnant and scared, never got to thank him properly. Paying it forward now, Barbara Mills. We're thinking of making a book, Ruth said, her eyes twinkling. Call it $5 and a Kingdom of Kindness. What do you think? Before Ethan could answer, the door opened again. Sarah from the choir walked in with her teenage son Tommy, both carrying paper bags that smelled of fresh bread. For tomorrow's dinner, Sarah called out. Tommy insisted on baking extra. Tommy set his bag down and wandered over to the table, reading some of the notes. Hey, Mr. Cole, my friend Jake said his dad heard you on the radio, said you were really brave. Ethan felt his face warm, remembering the mocking tone of the shock jock, but Tommy's earnest expression held no trace of sarcasm. Ruth watched Tommy read more notes. The young ones get it, don't they? They understand it's not about the money at all. It's about seeing each other, Joe said quietly. Really seeing. Ethan looked at the growing collection of stories, each one a testament to the quiet goodness that lived in their community. His chest felt tight, but not with the anxiety that had plagued him since the news broke. This was different, a warm ache that spread through him like sunlight. I should get home to Lily, he said finally, his voice slightly rough. She's got homework to finish before choir practice. Ruth nodded, but her knowing smile told him she understood what he wasn't saying. As he turned to leave, she called after him. Sometimes God uses the smallest seeds to grow the tallest trees, Ethan. Remember that. The Wednesday evening choir practice filled the church hall with a gentle buzz of activity. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as voices mingled with the soft clicking of knitting needles and the whisper of fabric being smoothed. Ethan stood awkwardly in his undershirt while Mrs. Henderson, her silver hair neatly pinned back, knelt to mark the hem of his old navy suit pants with careful pins. Stand still now, dear, she murmured, squinting through her bifocals. We'll have these looking just right. Across the room, Lily darted between the tables where other church grandmothers worked on quilts they'd brought from home. Her small hands helped to hold corners straight as Mrs. Peterson and Mrs. Chin hung them along the walls. Each quilt told its own story, wedding ring patterns, log cabin designs, and starbursts in warm, welcoming colors. Look, Dad, Lily called out, pointing to a particularly intricate piece. This one has the same colors as Ben's ceremonial jacket. Mrs. Henderson chuckled as she shifted to work on Ethan's sleeve. That's no accident, sweetheart. We chose those colors special. The sound of choir practice drifted down from the sanctuary upstairs, the familiar notes of Amazing Grace floating through the air. Near the kitchen, Deacon Ruth directed traffic as women arrived with covered dishes, signing up for what they'd bring to the dinner. The smell of fresh coffee and somebody's apple pie made the whole place feel like home. My Harold wore this same suit style to church for 40 years, Mrs. Henderson said, her weathered hands steady as she pinned the cuff. A good suit's like a good man. Just needs a little care to stand tall again. Ethan swallowed hard at her words. He'd bought this suit for his wife's funeral and hadn't worn it since. Now here it was, being brought back to life by caring hands. More volunteers filtered in, carrying stacks of plates and extra chairs from the storage room. Mr. Watson, who'd fought in Desert Storm, was showing younger men how to arrange the tables in neat rows. His wife Jenny copied out place cards in elegant calligraphy, each one personalized with care. Dad, come see. Lily tugged at his arm, nearly causing Mrs. Henderson to drop her pins. Mrs. Chen is teaching us how to fold the napkins like flowers. Just a minute, honey, Ethan said, trying not to move. Let Mrs. Henderson finish first. But he could see his daughter's excitement as she rushed back to the table where several women had gathered. They showed her how to create delicate folds, praising her careful attempts. Lily's face glowed with pride as she completed each one. The 5 Kindness Challenge jar sat in a place of honor near the entrance, already half full of bills and handwritten notes. Ethan noticed people stopping to read the stories posted around it, nodding and sometimes wiping their eyes. There, Mrs. Henderson said finally, sitting back on her heels. That should do it. Try walking around a bit. Ethan moved carefully in the altered suit, feeling the difference in how it hung on his frame. In the wall mirror, he barely recognized himself. The suit no longer looked like something he'd pulled from the back of his closet in grief. It looked dignified, intentional. You've worked magic, Mrs. Henderson, he said softly. She patted his arm. Nonsense. Just showed what was there all along. More choir members came downstairs after practice, joining the bustling activity. Some helped hang the last quilts, while others arranged flowers in mason jars. The whole room hummed with purpose and anticipation. Miss Gloria, who played organ on Sundays, sat at the old upright piano in the corner, testing out gentle background music for the dinner. Her arthritic fingers moved slowly but surely over the keys, adding another layer of warmth to the atmosphere. Ethan watched as Mr. Peterson, who usually sat quietly in the back pew, carefully arranged his photographs of old Riverside along one wall, images of the town's better moments, when neighbors had helped neighbors through hard times. The whole scene struck him suddenly. All these people giving their time, their talents, their treasures to make this dinner special. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Because something about this simple act of sharing food with the stranger had awakened something in them all. He stepped outside for a moment, needing some air. The street lamp cast a gentle glow over the church steps, and the evening air carried the last warmth of early fall. Through the windows, he could see the continued movement inside, his community, his people, working together with quiet joy. Standing there in his newly hemmed suit, Ethan realized this had grown far beyond his small act of kindness or even the prince's visit. This dinner had become something else entirely, a chance for everyone to show who they really were, what their town could be when they chose to shine. The warm glow of sunset filtered through the stained glass windows of the church hall, casting rainbow patterns across tables draped in white cloths. The mingled aromas of fresh pancakes, steaming casseroles, and coffee filled the air. Paper flowers and handmade quilts decorated the walls, their bright colors making the usually plain space feel festive and welcoming. Ethan adjusted his freshly hemmed suit jacket, feeling both out of place and strangely at home. Lily bounced beside him in her best dress, her hair tied back with ribbons that matched her woven bracelet. The hall hummed with quiet chatter as people found their seats, church members, curious townspeople, and a small contingent from the Kamari delegation in their formal attire. "Dad, look!" Lily tugged his sleeve, pointing to where Ben had just entered through the side door. The young prince wore a simple dark suit rather than his ceremonial clothes, though a small pin with his country's flag glinted on his lapel. His Aunt Asha walked beside him, elegant in deep blue traditional dress. Ben's face lit up when he spotted them. He hurried over, weaving between tables with the eager energy of any teenage boy rather than the measured pace expected of royalty. "Ethan, Lily!" He embraced them both without hesitation. "The pancakes smell amazing." "That's Mrs. Peterson's secret recipe," Lily informed him solemnly. "She won't even tell the pastor what's in them." Their laughter drew warm smiles from around the room. Deacon Ruth appeared at Ethan's elbow, gently herding them toward their seats at the main table. The familiar faces of his community surrounded them, the choir ladies who'd hemmed his suit, veterans he saw at the bus stop, families whose children sang with Lily. After grace was said and plates were filled, Ben stood up, tapping his water glass with a spoon. The hall fell quiet. Ethan felt his neck grow warm as all eyes turned their way, but Ben's genuine smile put him at ease. "When I first came to your town," Ben began, his voice clear and steady, "I wanted to see real people, not just shake hands at formal events. I was cold and hungry that morning at the bus station. What I found was more than just warmth and food. I found the true heart of America in one man's simple kindness." He turned to face Ethan directly. "You didn't know who I was. You only saw someone who needed help. You gave your last $5 and shared your own lunch without hesitation. That meant everything to me." Ethan swallowed hard, fighting the tightness in his throat. Lily squeezed his hand under the table. "In my country," Ben continued, "we have a saying. The smallest gift given freely holds more worth than a palace built on pride. Ethan Cole showed me that wisdom lives here too." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small cloth-wrapped package. "Lily, this is for you." Lily accepted it with wide eyes. Inside lay a bracelet identical to her mother's, but new, the threads gleaming with fresh color. "The grandmothers in my village wove this specially," Ben explained. "Now you and your father will always have a connection to both your mother's memory and to Kamar." Lily's eyes welled up as she slipped it onto her wrist beside her original bracelet. The matching pattern seemed to glow in the evening light. Ethan blinked rapidly, his own vision blurring. The choir director stepped forward, raising her hands. The familiar opening notes of Blessed Assurance rose from the risers where Lily's choir stood ready. The old hymn filled the hall, sweet and clear, led by children's voices. Ethan saw handkerchiefs appear throughout the crowd as people dabbed at their eyes. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine! The words wrapped around them like an embrace. Ethan felt the weight of years of grief and struggle lift slightly from his shoulders. Beside him, Lily sang with her choir, her face shining. Ben hummed along, clearly having learned the tune during his visits to practice. Camera flashes sparkled here and there, capturing the moment. When the song ended, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. People stood to applaud, their faces full of joy and something deeper, hope, perhaps, or renewed faith in simple human kindness. The 5 kindness challenge jar on the welcome table overflowed with bills and handwritten stories. Ethan looked around at the gathered faces, his neighbors, his daughter, this young prince who'd somehow become their friend, and felt truly at peace for the first time since losing his wife. The world seemed brighter, warmer, full of possibility. The lingering ache in his chest had transformed into something lighter, almost like happiness. Ben leaned over to whisper, "Thank you for showing me what real hospitality means." His eyes were suspiciously bright. "I'll never forget this." Lily hugged her father tight, both bracelets catching the light on her wrists. "I love you, Dad," she said simply. Ethan held his daughter close, surrounded by the warmth of community and friendship. For this moment, at least, everything felt right with the world. The evening continued with shared desserts and quiet conversation, laughter mixing with the soft clink of coffee cups. People moved between tables, swapping stories and admiring Lily's bracelets. The atmosphere was one of genuine celebration, not of wealth or status, but of the simple power of human kindness. The buzzing of Ethan's phone jolted him awake. Scattered across his screen were dozens of missed calls, text messages, and voicemails. His stomach tightened as he scrolled through the notifications. Calls from work, the church, numbers he didn't recognize. A text from Deacon Ruth caught his eye. "Ethan, call me ASAP. There's trouble." He clicked on a link she'd sent. His hands grew cold as he watched a grainy video that showed him at the church dinner, apparently slipping something into his pocket. The camera zoomed in, and there was a flash of green, made to look like cash. The comments below exploded with accusations. Knew it was a setup. Paid actor. Shameless publicity stunt. The doorbell rang, making him jump. Lily emerged from her room, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Daddy, what's wrong?" "Stay in your room for a minute, sweetheart," Ethan said, his voice carefully steady. He opened the door to find Clint standing there, rain dripping from his jacket. "Cole," Clint said, not meeting his eyes. "Got a situation here." He shifted uncomfortably on the welcome mat. "That video's everywhere. Corporate's concerned about the attention. Think it's best if you take some time off until things clear up." "That video's fake," Ethan said, his words coming out sharp and clear. "You know me, Clint. 15 years at the plant. Never caused trouble." Clint shrugged, still not looking at him. "Not my call. HR wants you to sign these papers. Paid leave, for now." He thrust a manila envelope forward. Ethan's hands shook slightly as he took it. "How long?" "Until the investigation's complete." "Could be a week." "Could be." Clint trailed off, already turning away. "Just keep your head down." The door had barely closed when Ethan's phone rang again. An unfamiliar number. "Mr. Cole, this is Sandra Martinez from Child Protective Services. We received an anonymous report about possible financial instability affecting your daughter's welfare. We need to schedule a home visit." The room seemed to tilt. "What kind of report?" The caller expressed concern about your employment status and ability to provide basic necessities. "Given your daughter's age and your status as a single parent, we're required to investigate." Her voice was professional but not unkind. "I can be there in 20 minutes." Ethan ran his hands through his hair. "Yes, fine. We'll be here." He found Lily in her room, already dressed for school but sitting very still on her bed, hugging her backpack. She looked up at him with wide eyes. "Are we in trouble?" "No, honey." He sat beside her, pulling her close. "Some people are telling lies about us, about what happened at the dinner. But we know the truth, right?" She nodded against his shoulder. "You shared your sandwich with Ben because he was hungry, like Jesus with the loaves and fishes." A knock at the door made them both start. "Ms. Martinez was efficient but thorough, making notes about the apartment's condition, checking the kitchen cabinets, asking Lily questions about meals and school. Ethan watched helplessly as she photographed their nearly empty refrigerator. "We're between grocery trips," he explained, hating how defensive he sounded. "I usually shop on payday." "And when is that?" she asked, writing in her notebook. "It was supposed to be." He swallowed hard. "Today." Lily's school bus honked outside. She lingered by the door, uncertain. "Dad?" "Go on, sweetheart. Everything's fine." He managed a smile he didn't feel. "Have a good day." But 2 hours later, his phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Dad, they searched my backpack. The principal said they had to. Can you come get me?" The words blurred as rain started falling outside, pattering against the windows. Another text came through, this one from the mayor's office, canceling their planned community outreach event. Given recent developments, Ethan sank onto the couch, dropping his head into his hands. The rain fell harder, drumming against the roof like accusations. His phone kept buzzing with notifications, but he couldn't bring himself to look anymore. This simple act of sharing food with a hungry kid had somehow turned into this nightmare, threatening everything he'd worked so hard to build for Lily. The manila envelope from Clint lay unopened on the coffee table, the CPS worker's business card beside it, and on the wall, the calendar showed all the upcoming bills: rent, utilities, Lily's school supplies. He'd always managed to stretch his paycheck just far enough, but now, the rain pounded harder, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. Through the window, he could see the church steeple where just yesterday they'd all gathered in joy and celebration, where Ben had hugged Lily and given her that beautiful bracelet, where the choir had sung about Amazing Grace. It felt like a lifetime ago. The apartment was dark, except for the blue glow of passing headlights through the rain-streaked windows. Ethan sat in his old armchair, watching Lily toss and turn on the couch. She'd refused to sleep in her room tonight, scared someone might come knocking again. Her favorite quilt was pulled up to her chin, but it couldn't keep away the day's shadow. The social worker's visit had shaken them both. The woman had been polite but thorough, checking their cupboards, asking about income, taking notes about everything from Lily's school attendance to the apartment's heating. Ethan's hands still trembled, remembering how Lily's backpack had been searched at school, how her classmates had whispered. His phone lay silent now. He'd turned it off after the 20th call from reporters. The local news van had finally left their street around sunset, but not before filming their building's entrance. Some of the neighbors had given interviews, shaking their heads about that man who tried to fool everybody. The old clock on the wall ticked past midnight. Ethan couldn't stay here, couldn't keep staring at these walls. He needed something. Space, air, prayer. He scribbled a note for Lily in case she woke. "Gone to church. Back soon. Love. Dad." Then he grabbed his jacket and slipped out into the night. The streets were empty, peaceful in a way they hadn't been all day. His footsteps echoed off wet pavement as he walked the familiar route to St. Matthew's. The church's stone walls rose dark against the sky, but a faint light glowed from the chapel windows. The heavy wooden door creaked as he entered. The sanctuary was empty, lit only by the eternal flame and a few votive candles. Their soft light caught the edges of the stained glass, turning the saints into shadowy guardians. Ethan slid into the last pew, the same one where he'd sat at Sarah's funeral 3 years ago. The polished wood was smooth under his palms as he leaned forward. "Lord," he whispered, his voice barely disturbing the silence. "I tried to do the right thing, just the right thing." His throat tightened. "But now Lily's scared. My job's gone. Everything's falling apart." He pressed his forehead against his clasped hands. "I'm not asking for myself, but Lily. She needs stability, security. I can't give her that if they take everything away." His shoulders shook. "Lord, take the stage. I can't. I just can't anymore." The flame flickered, casting dancing shadows on the altar cloth. For a long moment, there was only the sound of rain against the high windows and Ethan's ragged breathing. Then came the soft click of a door opening. "I thought I might find you here?" Deacon Ruth's voice was gentle in the darkness. Her sensible shoes made quiet sounds on the stone floor as she approached. Ethan didn't look up. "Ruth, I'm sorry about all this. The church getting dragged into it." "Stop that right now." She settled into the pew beside him, her weathered hands smoothing her skirt. "The church is exactly where this belongs. Where else do we bring our burdens?" She pulled something from her large bag, a thick manila envelope. Besides, I've been busy today. Very busy indeed. Ethan glanced at the envelope. What's that? Testimonies. Ruth's eyes sparkled in the candlelight. From people whose lives were touched by the 5 Kindness Challenge. Did you know Mary Thompson used her $5 to buy yarn? She's made 15 baby hats for the hospital since then. And old Mr. Jenkins? He bought coffee for a stressed young mother at the diner. Turns out she was having the worst day of her life, and that small kindness kept her going. She pulled out paper after paper. The Veterans Group has started their own kindness fund. The High School Service Club is doing the same. Your $5 didn't just help Ben that day. It started a wave of goodness in this town. Ethan stared at the papers, his vision blurring. But the video is a lie, Ruth said firmly. And lies don't stand long in God's light. Truth has a way of breaking through, especially when good people stand together. She patted his hand. You're not alone in this, Ethan Cole, not by a long shot. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the eternal flame dance. Finally, Ethan stood, his joints stiff from the cold pew. Thank you, Ruth, he said quietly. For everything. She smiled up at him. Go home to your girl. Get some rest. Tomorrow's another day. Ethan walked back through the empty streets, the envelope of testimonies tucked inside his jacket to protect it from the rain. He didn't know if it would be enough to counter the lies, to save his job, to keep Lily safe. But something in his chest had loosened, just a little, like a fist, slowly unclenching. He left the church behind him, its windows still glowing softly in the night. Saturday afternoon light filtered through the children's hospital windows, casting warm patches on the polished floors. Ethan and Lily walked through the sliding doors, each carrying a stack of carefully folded quilts from the church ladies. Despite everything that had happened, they'd insisted on delivering these handmade comfort pieces to the pediatric ward. They're so soft, Dad, Lily said, running her fingers over the top quilt's geometric pattern. Miss Betty even embroidered little hearts in the corners. Ethan managed a small smile. The past week had been rough, but the simple act of bringing these quilts felt right. The lobby buzzed with weekend visitor traffic, parents with balloons, siblings clutching stuffed animals, nurses in colorful scrubs hurrying past. Through the crowd, Ethan spotted Ben near the information desk. The young prince was dressed casually in jeans and a blue sweater, talking with a group of hospital volunteers. Even from a distance, something seemed off. Ben's usual energetic presence was subdued, his normally straight posture slightly stooped. Ben! Lily called out, waving with her free hand. Ben turned, his face lighting up at the sight of them. He took 2 steps forward, then suddenly stopped. His face went ashen. I don't feel. The words came out barely above a whisper. Ben's knees buckled. Ethan dropped the quilts and lunged forward, catching the boy before he hit the floor. Ben's skin felt clammy, his breathing shallow. We need help. Ethan's military training kicked in as he cradled Ben's head. Medical emergency! The lobby erupted into controlled chaos. Security rushed forward. An alarm sounded. Within seconds, medical staff converged with a gurney. What happened? A doctor in blue scrubs took charge, helping transfer Ben while checking vital signs. He just collapsed, Ethan explained, Lily clutching his arm. He looked pale before. More staff arrived, including a woman Ethan recognized as Dr. Warner from the news coverage of Ben's hospital visit. Her eyes widened with recognition. Get him to Emergency Bay 1, she ordered, and someone contact the Royal Medical Team immediately. As they wheeled Ben away, Asha Rahim burst through the stairwell door, her usual composure cracking with worry. What happened? Where are they taking him? This way, Minister, Dr. Warner directed, leading her toward the emergency department. She glanced back at Ethan. Sir, please wait here. Security will want to speak with you. Ethan nodded, holding Lily close as they settled into lobby chairs. The quilts lay forgotten on the floor where he dropped them. A nurse kindly gathered them up, placing them on a nearby table. Is Ben going to be okay? Lily's voice quivered. The doctors will help him, Ethan assured her, though his own heart raced with concern. Time crawled. Security took their statement. Hospital staff brought them water. Lily dozed against his shoulder while Ethan watched the emergency department doors, praying silently. Nearly 2 hours later, Dr. Warner emerged with Asha. Both women made straight for Ethan and Lily. Mr. Cole, Dr. Warner began. Prince Benjamin has a rare form of anemia. We've stabilized him. but he needs an immediate transfusion. The problem is, his blood type has an extremely uncommon subclassification. Asha stepped forward. The Royal Medical Team is flying in donated blood, but it won't arrive for several hours. Ben needs help now. Doctor? Warner consulted her tablet. Mr. Cole, our records show you're a veteran. Would you be willing to let us check your blood type? The military database sometimes has detailed typing information. Of course, Ethan said without hesitation. Whatever you need. The doctor tapped rapidly on her screen. Her eyebrows shot up. This can't be. Mr. Cole, according to your National Guard records, you're an exact match. You have the same rare subtype. Asha grabbed the doctor's arm. Are you certain? The military does extensive blood typing, Dr. Warner explained. This is incredible luck. Ethan was already rolling up his sleeve. What do you need me to do? Dad? Lily sat up straighter, suddenly alert. It's okay, sweetheart, he assured her. I'm just going to help Ben, like when people donate blood at church. Dr. Warner called for a nurse. We'll need to run a quick confirmation test, but if you're willing to donate, I am, Ethan said firmly. Asha touched his arm. Thank you, after everything that's happened this week. Ethan shook his head. None of that matters right now. A nurse arrived with paperwork and testing supplies. As she swabbed his arm to draw a sample, Ethan felt a profound sense of certainty. All the chaos of the past days, the suspension, the rumors, the investigations, faded away. This simple act of giving blood was what truly mattered. Lily watched the nurse work, her earlier fear replaced by curiosity. Will this make Ben better? It will help, Dr. Warner assured her. She turned to Ethan. The confirmation test will take about 15 minutes. Then, if you're still willing. I am, Ethan repeated more firmly this time. The next quarter hour passed quickly. The test confirmed the match. Ethan signed consent forms while a child life specialist arrived to sit with Lily. Then he followed Dr. Warner toward the donation room, rolling up his sleeve once more. As the nurse prepared his arm, Ethan closed his eyes. He'd given blood before, but never for someone he knew, never for such an urgent need. The memory of Ben's collapse spurred his resolve. This was why he joined the Guard years ago, to help others when they needed it most. Ready? The nurse asked, positioning the needle. Ethan nodded, face set with quiet determination. Morning sunlight streamed through the hospital window, casting a warm glow across the sterile room. Ben lay propped up against white pillows, his color much improved from yesterday's frightening pallor. Ethan sat in the chair beside the bed, still a bit woozy from the blood donation, his coffee going cold on the side table. You didn't have to stay all night, Ben said softly, fiddling with his IV tube. But I'm glad you did. Couldn't leave until I knew you were okay. Ethan's voice was gruff with fatigue. Lily had fallen asleep on the waiting room couch under one of the church quilts, watched over by Deacon Ruth. A gentle knock interrupted them. Asha entered, her usual composed demeanor showing signs of both exhaustion and satisfaction. She carried a tablet and wore the same clothes from yesterday, suggesting she too had been up all night. Good morning, she said, pulling up another chair. Ben, how are you feeling? Much better, Aunt Asha. The doctors say Ethan's blood was perfect. Asha nodded, then turned to Ethan with purpose in her eyes. We've been busy while you two were recovering. My team has uncovered something you need to see. She handed him the tablet. On the screen was a series of emails and financial records. As Ethan read, his hands began to shake slightly. The smear campaign, Asha explained, was orchestrated by James Darden, Clint's cousin. He works for a political consulting firm that handles Mayor Hargrove's re-election campaign. Ethan's jaw tightened. They wanted to discredit me? The mayor was worried your story might overshadow his Riverside Revival campaign platform. The doctored video, the anonymous CPS call. It all traces back to their office. Ben sat up straighter in his bed, his face flushing with anger. That's horrible. They tried to hurt you just because people liked what you did? Politics can be ugly, nephew, Asha said gently. She touched Ethan's arm. But truth has a way of emerging. The local news stations are already running retractions. The Cincinnati Enquirer wants to do a feature story on the 5 Kindness Challenge. As if on cue, Ethan's phone buzzed. Messages were pouring in, apologies, support, offers of help. The plant board was reviewing Clint's suspension order. The CPS case had been marked unfounded and closed. A text from Deacon Ruth made him catch his breath. Mayor Hargrove is at the church. Wants to apologize publicly. Says he'll resign if you ask. Ben leaned forward to read the message, then looked at Ethan with curious eyes. What will you do? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, thinking of Lily sleeping peacefully in the waiting room, of the quilts made with love, of all the small kindnesses that had rippled out from one rainy morning at the bus depot. I don't want anyone to resign, he said finally. That won't help heal the town. But I think it's time I stop being afraid to speak up. Asha smiled warmly. The mayor is organizing a gathering in the town square this afternoon. Would you be willing to address everyone? A month ago, the very thought would have terrified him, but something had shifted in Ethan's heart. The fear of judgment, of standing out, of being seen, it all seemed less important now. Yes, he said simply. I'll speak. Ben reached out and grabbed Ethan's hand, his grip surprisingly strong for someone who'd been so ill. Can I come too? The doctors say I can leave if I promise to rest afterward. Of course you can come, Ethan replied, squeezing the boy's hand. You're part of this story too. Asha stood, straightening her jacket. I'll make the arrangements. And Ethan? Thank you. Not just for saving Ben's life, but for showing us all what real courage looks like. As she left, Ethan leaned back in his chair, feeling the lingering weakness from the blood donation, but also a new kind of strength. The truth had come to light. The shadows of suspicion and fear were lifting. For the first time since this all began, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Ben watched him with wise eyes. You know what my father always says? A kingdom rises or falls on the small choices of ordinary people. Ethan chuckled. I'm about as ordinary as they come. No, Ben said firmly. You're extraordinary. You just didn't know it yet. Through the window, they could see the town square in the distance, where workers were already setting up a podium and chairs. Soon, Ethan would stand there and tell their story. Not for glory or attention, but because sometimes the simplest truths needed to be spoken aloud. That kindness matters, that fear shouldn't win, that every person deserves dignity. The morning light grew stronger, filling the room with warmth. In the waiting room, Lily stirred beneath her quilt, ready to face the new day. And Ethan Cole, no longer afraid, began to think about what he would say to his neighbors, his town, his community, knowing at last that his voice deserved to be heard. The end. The morning sun cast long shadows across Riverside's town square as people gathered in growing numbers. Ethan stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps, his hands fidgeting with his tie. The same tie he'd worn to the church dinner just days ago, when everything had seemed so bright before it all came crashing down. Deep breaths, Dad, Lily whispered, squeezing his hand. She wore her best dress, both bracelets, the old and new, jingling on her wrist. The crowd had swelled beyond anything Ethan expected. Church ladies clutched their purses and dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. Veterans in their service caps stood straight back near the front. Plant workers huddled in small groups, their faces a mix of shame and support. Mayor Hargrove climbed the steps first, his usual confident stride replaced by something more hesitant. The microphone squealed as he adjusted it. Folks of Riverside, he began, his voice carrying across the hushed square, we're here today because our town lost its way. Because I lost my way. He paused, pulling out a wrinkled piece of paper. As your mayor, I failed to stand up for what was right when it mattered. I let political pressure and fear of controversy cloud my judgment. Ethan watched the mayor's hands shake as he gripped the podium. This wasn't the smooth-talking politician he knew. This was a man stripped bare of pretense. Mr. Cole? The mayor turned to face him directly. I apologize. Your act of kindness should have been celebrated, not questioned. Instead, we allowed a good man to be smeared for political gain. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Near the back, Ethan spotted Clint shifting uncomfortably, his usual swagger deflated. Two members of the plant board stood nearby, their expressions stern. The first veteran to approach was Jim Martinez, who'd served in Ethan's guard unit years ago. He walked with his cane, but stood tall. That $5 you gave? It started something, brother. My granddaughter's class raised money for the food bank, called it the Riverside Kindness Project. He pulled Ethan into a fierce hug. You showed them what service really means. More people stepped forward. Mrs. Chen from the corner market described how customers had started a pay-it-forward chain for bread and milk. Coach Thompson admitted he'd changed his mind about the foreign exchange program after seeing how the town embraced Ben. Sarah Williams, one of the plant's longest-serving employees, stepped up to the microphone next. Her voice quavered but grew stronger as she spoke. I've worked at Riverside Manufacturing for 30 years. Yesterday, we submitted over 200 signatures to the board. She turned to where Clint stood. We won't work under someone who uses lies to hurt good people. The plant board chairman cleared his throat. Effective immediately, Mr. Darden's employment has been terminated. We apologize for any part our management played in this situation. Clint's face reddened. He pushed through the crowd toward the street, shoulders hunched against the whispers that followed him. Asha Rahim, elegant in her blue headscarf, took the podium next. Prince Benjamin is recovering well, thanks to Mr. Cole's generous donation. But that's not why I'm here. She smiled warmly at Ethan. Your late wife's work in our village inspired our food dignity program. Now, you've shown the same spirit. We'd like to establish the Kamar Riverside Fellowship here, a culinary training program and community pantry that honors both our cultures. Deacon Ruth stepped forward, holding up the now familiar jar. Our 5 Kindness Challenge has raised over $3,000. But more importantly, it's raised hope. She began reading from a thick stack of papers. A teenager bought lunch for a struggling classmate. An elderly couple received free groceries. A stranded driver got help with gas. Ethan felt Lily's grip tighten on his waist. He looked down to see tears streaming down her cheeks, but she was beaming. Told you people would see, she whispered. The morning sun had climbed higher, warming the square. Ethan looked out at the faces, familiar and new, young and old, all colors and backgrounds. He saw not the division that had threatened to tear them apart, but the threads of connection that had been there all along, waiting to be woven together. Mrs. Chen's grandson darted forward, pressing something into Ethan's hand, a fresh $5 bill. For the next person who needs it, the boy said shyly. Ethan carefully folded the bill and slipped it into his pocket, right next to his heart. Sometimes the smallest gestures carried the greatest weight. He learned that on a rainy Tuesday with his last $5, and now the whole town had learned it too. The afternoon sun streamed through the stained glass windows of Riverside First Methodist, painting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. Reporters filled the usually quiet sanctuary, their cameras and notepads at the ready. The air hummed with anticipation and the soft whispers of conversation. Ethan sat in the front row beside Lily, both still processing the whirlwind of the morning's events at the town square. His daughter kept smoothing her dress, her eyes fixed on the twin bracelets, hers and the one from the Kamari grandmothers, that adorned her wrist. Asha Rahim stood at the lectern, her traditional dress, a deep purple that seemed to capture both dignity and warmth. She waited for the murmuring to settle, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the church. "We gather here today not just to right wrongs, but to build bridges." She smiled, her gaze finding Ethan's. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness reveal the greatest opportunities for change. The reporters leaned forward as Asha unfolded a document bearing official seals. "It is my great honor to announce the establishment of the Kamar Riverside Fellowship Program." She paused, letting the words settle. "This initiative will create 3 vital community resources." Lily grabbed her father's hand as Asha continued. "First, a culinary training program that will teach professional cooking skills to local residents. Second, a community pantry based on our successful dignity-based shopping model from Kamar, where people can choose their own food with privacy and respect." Ethan's throat tightened as he remembered his own careful budgeting of food stamps years ago, the embarrassment of counting pennies at the checkout while others waited behind him. "And third," Asha's voice softened with emotion, "we will establish the Sarah Cole Memorial Scholarship Fund, named after a remarkable nurse who once brought hope to our village during their darkest hours." A small gasp escaped Ethan. His late wife's name echoed through the sanctuary, and suddenly she felt present in a way that made his heart ache with both loss and pride. Lily pressed closer to his side, tears gleaming in her eyes. "Sarah Cole understood that dignity matters as much as food itself," Asha continued. She wrote in her journal about our village's peace weave bracelets, about how they represented the threads that bind us all together. Today, we honor her vision by creating opportunities for others to build those same connections. The reporters' cameras clicked rapidly as Asha turned to face Ethan directly. "Mr. Cole, your simple act of sharing lunch with a hungry boy showed us that the spirit of Sarah's work lives on. We would be honored if you would consider taking on leadership of this program." The offer hung in the air like a bell tone. Ethan felt dozens of eyes on him, but for once, the attention didn't make him want to shrink away. Instead, he thought of Sarah, of her passionate belief that everyone deserved to be treated with respect. He thought of Ben counting coins in the rain, of the veterans and grandmothers who'd stepped forward to share their own stories of times when $5 made all the difference. The position offers a full salary and benefits, Asha added gently. But more importantly, it offers a chance to create the kind of change Sarah believed in. One person, one meal, one moment of dignity at a time. Ethan stood slowly, his work-worn hands steady now. The light through the stained glass seemed to wrap around him like a blessing as he made his way to the lectern. Words rose in his throat, simple and true, while tears gathered in his eyes. "Yes," he said quietly, his voice carrying in the hushed sanctuary. "I'll do it. For Sarah. For all of us." The cameras flashed again, but Ethan barely noticed them. He was looking at Lily, whose smile shone brighter than any photograph could capture. She wore her mother's bracelet pattern, a pattern that had traveled from a distant village to become part of their story. Now it would help write a new chapter for their whole community. Asha stepped forward and took his hand, her eyes glistening with understanding. In that moment, Ethan felt the weight of recent days lifting, replaced by something lighter, something that felt a lot like hope. The morning sun cast long shadows through the dusty windows of the empty storefront on Main Street. Ethan Cole stood in the doorway, keys jingling in his hand as he took in the vast space before him. The building had once been Riverside's first grocery store, its high tin ceiling and exposed brick walls telling stories of decades past. Lily bounced beside him, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She'd begged to come see the space before school, and Ethan couldn't refuse, not when her excitement matched the flutter in his own chest. "It's huge, Dad." She spun in a circle, her voice echoing off the bare walls. "Sure is, kiddo." Ethan stepped inside, his work boots leaving prints in the thin layer of dust on the wooden floor. The space was rough around the edges, but he could see its potential. Years of fixing machines had taught him to look past surface problems to the good bones underneath. He pulled a worn notebook from his back pocket and clicked his pen. The morning light streamed through the front windows, making it easy to sketch a rough layout. "Let's see, shelving units here," he muttered, marking lines on the paper. "Wide aisles so folks can browse properly." Lily peered over his arm at the drawing. "Like a real store?" "Exactly like a real store." Ethan smiled, remembering Asha's words about dignity. Nobody likes feeling like they're getting a handout. Here, people will shop like anywhere else. They'll just pay what they can. He walked deeper into the space, measuring steps with his feet. "Produce section near the windows," he said, making more notes. "Natural light makes everything look better." Lily trailed behind him, her shoes tapping on the floorboards. "Can we have a little cafe area, like at the fancy grocery store?" Ethan paused, considering. The idea had merit, a place where people could sit, chat, feel welcome. "That's smart thinking, Lil. Maybe right here by the front." He sketched a small seating area in his notebook. "Tables, some comfortable chairs, and a coffee machine," Lily added. "The church ladies can take turns bringing cookies." Ethan chuckled. The church ladies had already formed a volunteer committee, led by Deacon Ruth. Their enthusiasm was catching. Moving toward the back of the building, Ethan found a large storage room with steel shelving still intact. "Perfect for bulk storage," he murmured, adding it to his layout. The loading dock would make deliveries easy. Lily wandered into a smaller side room with windows overlooking an empty lot. "What's this space for, Dad?" Ethan followed her in, noting the good lighting and separate entrance. "Could be our teaching kitchen, remember? Part of the fellowship is teaching folks to cook healthy meals on a budget." "Oh," Lily's face lit up. "That's where we can do the pancake breakfast." "Pancake breakfast?" "For opening day," she twirled, bracelets jingling. "Everyone loves pancakes, even princes." Ethan smiled, remembering Ben's face lighting up at his first taste of diner pancakes. "You might be onto something there, kiddo," he added kitchen equipment to his growing list of needs. Walking the space again, Ethan's mind filled with possibilities. He'd need volunteers, training programs, inventory systems. It was daunting, but for the first time in years, he felt truly useful. This wasn't just about giving away food, it was about giving people back their dignity. Lily's voice broke into his thoughts. "Dad, are you scared?" Ethan knelt beside her, meeting her eyes. "A little," he admitted. "It's a big job." She fingered her twin bracelets, the one from her mother and the one from Kamar. "Mom would be proud, don't you think?" "Yeah, baby, I think she would." He stood, tucking his notebook away. "Ready to lock up?" You've got school, and I've got a lot of work ahead. Lily nodded, taking one last look around the empty space. At the door, they both paused. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows, painting possibilities across the floor. Ethan turned the key in the lock, the click echoing with promise. "We're really doing this," Lily whispered, slipping her hand into his. "We really are." Ethan squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of the keys in his pocket, not just metal now, but purpose. The Wednesday morning sun painted golden stripes across Ethan's small kitchen counter. He stood at the stove, spatula in hand, as the sweet aroma of pancake batter filled the apartment. The sizzle of butter on the griddle mixed with Lily's giggles and Ben's animated storytelling. Ben sat at their worn kitchen table, wearing jeans and a plain blue t-shirt, a stark contrast to his formal attire from previous weeks. Without the ceremonial jacket and perfectly styled hair, he looked like any other teenager, completely at ease in their modest home. "And then," Ben continued, gesturing with his orange juice glass, "the palace chef was so confused when I asked him to make American-style pancakes. He kept trying to make them fancy with exotic fruits and special sauces." Lily leaned forward, her elbows on the table. "Did you tell him about Dad's secret ingredient?" "No way." Ben clutched his heart in mock offense. "A promise is a promise. The cinnamon vanilla mix stays in Riverside." Ethan flipped another perfect golden circle onto the growing stack. "Smart man. Some secrets are worth keeping." He glanced at the clock. 2 hours until they had to head to the airport. The thought made his chest tighten a little. "Dad makes the best pancakes in the whole world," Lily declared, reaching for the syrup. "Even better than IHOP." "Careful with that syrup, kiddo," Ethan warned, but he was smiling. "We don't want Ben's last memory of us to be sticky clothes." Ben laughed, a carefree sound that filled the small kitchen. "I wouldn't mind. At least it would be real." He paused, his expression growing thoughtful. "Everything here has been real. The food, the people, the kindness, especially the kindness." Ethan set the last plate of pancakes on the table and sat down, watching as Ben cut into his stack with obvious delight. The boy's genuine appreciation for simple things never failed to touch him. "You know," Ben said between bites, "Mother says I've changed since coming here. She says I seem more grounded." "Good grounded or bad grounded?" Lily asked, tilting her head. "Definitely good." Ben reached into his pocket. "Which reminds me, I have something for you, Mr. Cole." He pulled out a gleaming gold coin, about the size of a $50. "This is a Kamari Courage coin. It's given to those who show true bravery, not just in big moments, but in the quiet ones that matter most." Ethan started to protest, but Ben held up his hand. "Please, in our culture, refusing such a gift is considered impolite." His eyes twinkled. "And you wouldn't want to cause an international incident, would you?" "Well, when you put it that way." Ethan accepted the coin, running his thumb over its intricate engravings. The metal was warm from being in Ben's pocket. "The inscription," Ben explained, says courage flows like water. It finds its way through the smallest spaces to nourish the world. Lily clapped her hands. "Just like your $5, Dad. It found its way to exactly where it needed to go." They spent the next hour sharing stories and making plans. Ben promised to write regular letters, real ones on paper, not just emails, and Lily insisted on teaching him their secret handshake before he left. "You have to practice it every day," she instructed seriously, "so you won't forget." "I will," Ben assured her, executing the complicated sequence of claps and fist bumps perfectly. "And you have to keep practicing your Arabic." "Shukran," Lily pronounced carefully, making Ben beam with pride. Too soon, it was time to leave for the airport. The drive was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts as the city rolled past their windows. When they pulled up to the international terminal, a discreet security detail materialized to escort Ben to his gate. Ethan stepped out of the car first, holding the door for Ben. "Take care of yourself, kid." He started to extend his hand for a formal handshake, but Ben pulled him into a quick, fierce hug instead. "Thank you," Ben whispered, "for everything." Lily jumped out last, her eyes bright with unshed tears. She held up her wrist, showing the woven bracelet that had started it all. Ben immediately raised his own wrist, wearing its twin. Lily pressed them together, the patterns matching perfectly. "Remember," she said softly, "whenever you miss us, just look at your bracelet. We'll be thinking of you too." The morning light streamed through the newly cleaned windows of the Kamar Riverside Community Pantry, catching dust motes that danced in the air. Church quilts hung on the freshly painted walls, their patterns telling stories of comfort and home. The aroma of coffee and warm pancakes filled every corner of the converted warehouse space. Ethan stood at the industrial griddle, his practiced hands moving with quiet confidence. The same fingers that had once tightened bolts now gracefully flipped golden pancakes, creating perfect circles that would make any diner cook proud. His apron, a gift from the church ladies, declared, "Pancakes equals love" in bright embroidery. The sound system, donated by the high school's audio club, played soft guitar music. Lily's choir had recorded several songs for the opening, and her clear voice now floated above the growing buzz of conversation. The shelves, built by local carpenters, stood neat and orderly, stocked with everything from fresh produce to canned goods. Mrs. Martinez, who had been first in line despite her arthritis, carefully selected fresh vegetables, placing them in her basket with deliberate care. Her dignity showed in every movement. This wasn't a handout, but a community space where everyone contributed what they could. "These tomatoes remind me of my garden back home," she said to no one in particular, her weathered hands gently testing their ripeness. A young mother nearby nodded in agreement, balancing a toddler on her hip while she examined a loaf of fresh bread. At the coffee station, Mr. Johnson, a retired veteran, poured cups for newcomers. His VA cap sat proudly on his head as he shared stories about his own hard times and how a kind word had made all the difference. The coffee station had become an unofficial gathering spot where people could warm their hands and their hearts. Ethan glanced up from his griddle to see Deacon Ruth directing traffic with her characteristic warmth. She knew exactly who needed an extra gentle welcome and who might appreciate a friendly push toward the fresh fruit section. The system they developed was simple. Take what you need, give what you can. No questions asked, no judgments made. A group of teenagers from Lily's school helped elderly shoppers carry baskets and reach high shelves. They wore matching t-shirts with the piece weave pattern, the same design that had started this whole journey with a simple bracelet. The sight made Ethan's throat tight with emotion. The quilts on the walls had been a stroke of genius from the church grandmothers. Each one told a story, some traditional patterns, others incorporating the Kamari designs they'd learned during the community weaving circles. They transformed the industrial space into something that felt like home. Near the entrance, a wall of photographs showed the journey from empty warehouse to today. Pictures of volunteers, painting walls, carpenter crews installing shelves, and community members delivering donations created a visual story of transformation. In the center hung the famous photo of Ethan and Ben sharing a sandwich at the bus depot, now a symbol of how small acts of kindness could grow into something bigger. The pancake station had become the heart of the operation. Ethan kept the plates moving steadily, adding fresh berries and warm syrup. Each plate came with a smile and often a story. People lingered over their breakfast, making new friends at the communal tables. "Just like my grandmother used to make," said an elderly man, closing his eyes as he savored a bite. His granddaughter sat beside him, her own plate piled high, notebook open as she recorded his stories about Depression-era cooking. The morning wore on, and the flow of people remained steady but manageable. Some brought garden produce to share. Others offered their time for future shifts. A retired accountant volunteered to teach a budgeting class. A local chef promised cooking lessons using pantry ingredients. Near noon, Ethan noticed a young father hesitating by the donation jar. He looked about Ethan's age, wearing work boots dusty from construction sites. The man glanced around, then quietly slipped a $5 bill into the jar. His eyes met Ethan's for a moment, and both men nodded in silent understanding. When there was finally a lull at the griddle, Ethan wiped his hands and walked over to the jar. He picked up the worn $5 bill, feeling its texture between his fingers. Without fanfare, he tucked it carefully under the jar's sign that read, "Leave with dignity, come back with joy." The gesture felt right, a perfect circle, like the pancakes he'd been flipping all morning. That $5 would keep moving, helping where it was needed, just as it had that rainy day at the bus depot. The late afternoon sun bathed Riverside's town square in golden light as dozens of folding tables formed a patchwork across the brick pavement. Colorful threads, beads, and ribbons dotted each surface like scattered jewels. The autumn breeze carried the scent of cinnamon and coffee from nearby food carts, mixing with the sound of gentle chatter and laughter. Ethan paused at the edge of the square, taking in the scene before him. Church ladies in floral blouses sat shoulder to shoulder with women in bright hijabs, their heads bent together over intricate weaving patterns. Little kids scrambled between chairs, collecting fallen beads in paper cups, while teenagers taught younger siblings the proper way to tie knots. "Dad, come look!" Lily waved from a table where she sat between Mrs. Chin from the library and Amira, one of the Kamari grandmothers. Their fingers moved in perfect sync, weaving threads into the familiar piece pattern. Mrs. Chin's silver hair caught the sunlight as she leaned in to show Lily a new technique. "The trick is in the tension," Mrs. Chin explained, her voice warm with patience. "Not too tight, not too loose, just like life, yes?" Amira nodded, her dark eyes twinkling. "In my village, we say the same. The weave must breathe like a happy heart." Ethan watched as more people filtered into the square. Officer Martinez, still in his uniform, sat down next to Mr. Washington from the barber shop. Neither man had ever made a bracelet before, but they laughed together as they fumbled with the threads. "Here, let me show you," said Sarah, a teenager from Lily's choir. She demonstrated the basic pattern, her hands moving with the confidence of youth. "See? Over, under, then through the loop." At another table, Deacon Ruth arranged plates of cookies beside a tray of something Ethan didn't recognize. Golden and flaky, dusted with powdered sugar. "Baklava," explained Mrs. Rahim, setting down another tray. "My mother's recipe. And these ladies," she gestured to the church baking committee, "they have promised to teach me their snickerdoodle secrets." The air filled with the mingled aromas of butter, honey, and spices. Someone started playing guitar, amazing grace, with a gentle Middle Eastern rhythm. A few voices joined in, humming harmony. Ethan moved through the crowd, stopping here and there to chat. He helped untangle a particularly stubborn knot for Tommy, the mechanic's son. He steadied a chair for elderly Mrs. Peterson, as she sat down to learn the piece weave from one of the Kamari teens. "You know, Mrs. Peterson said, adjusting her glasses, "I haven't made friendship bracelets since my own girls were young. But this pattern, it speaks to the heart, doesn't it?" The teen, Yasmin, according to her name tag, smiled and nodded. "Each color tells a story," she explained. "The blue is for hope, the red for strength, the white for peace." Near the fountain, a group of veterans from Ethan's old unit had set up their own table. They worked with careful precision, their strong hands gentle with the delicate threads. One of them had brought his granddaughter, who bounced from lap to lap, adding random beads to everyone's projects. "Cole!" called out Sergeant Mike, waving Ethan over. "Get over here and show us how it's done. These knots are worse than field radio repairs." Ethan sat down, demonstrating the weave he'd learned from watching Lily. As his fingers moved, he remembered Maria, his late wife, showing him the bracelet she'd brought back from Kamar. How her eyes had lit up, describing the village women who taught her, the way they welcomed her into their circle despite the language barrier. The square had transformed into something similar now. Language differences melted away as hands moved in shared purpose. Someone's grandmother was teaching a group of kids to say beautiful in 3 different languages. They repeated the words between giggles, their small fingers busy with threads and beads. A photographer from the local paper moved through the crowd, capturing moments. An elderly imam helping a little girl thread a needle, 2 teenage boys comparing their wobbly first attempts. A row of finished bracelets laid out like a rainbow bridge between cultures. The late afternoon lights softened, casting long shadows across the square. More people arrived, families after soccer practice, shop owners closing early, nurses just finishing their shifts. Each found a place at a table, was welcomed with smiles and offered threads. "Look, Dad," Lily bounded over, her wrist jangling with new bracelets. "Mrs. Amira says I'm a natural, and she's going to teach me to make dolmas next week." Ethan touched one of the bracelets, perfect piece weave, just like Maria's. The pattern that had traveled across oceans, passed from hand to hand, carrying stories of kindness and connection. He looked around the square again, seeing it through new eyes. Children of all shades played tag between the tables. Elderly hands, spotted with age, weathered by work, smooth with youth, moved in the same patterns. Laughter and music floated on the breeze. The smell of cookies and baklava mingled with coffee and sweet tea. For a moment, just a heartbeat, Ethan felt Maria's presence so strongly it took his breath away. This was what she'd seen in that distant village, not differences, but connections. The simple power of people sharing what they had, teaching what they knew, weaving something beautiful together. "You'd love this," he whispered, touching the bracelet on his own wrist. Around him, the square hummed with life and hope, each small knot binding the community closer together. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of Riverside Community Church, casting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. The usual Sunday morning bustle had settled into an expectant hush as the congregation waited for the children's choir performance. Ethan sat in his usual spot, third row from the front, his work-worn hands folded in his lap. The familiar creak of the choir loft steps drew his attention upward. 20 children filed out in their royal blue robes, Lily among them, her eyes bright with excitement. Deacon Ruth stepped forward to the pulpit, her voice warm and clear in the quiet sanctuary. "Today, our children's choir will debut a special piece," she announced. "Written by our own Mrs. Henderson and inspired by recent events that have touched all our hearts. The song is called $5 and a Kingdom." Ethan's throat tightened. He hadn't known about this. He watched Lily take her place in the front row, her woven bracelet catching the light as she clasped her hands together. The piano introduction began softly, like rain on a bus depot roof. Then the children's voices rose, pure and sweet. On a cold and rainy morning, when the world seemed gray and small, two strangers shared a sandwich in a depot's echoing hall. Ethan's mind drifted back to that Tuesday morning, the vending machine's harsh fluorescent light, the thin boy counting coins, the decision that had seemed so simple then, to share what little he had. He remembered the weight of his thermos, still warm, as he'd poured half his coffee into a paper cup. The chorus swelled, the harmonies weaving together like threads in a bracelet. $5 and some kindness? That's all it took to start? When heaven touched the earth that day and changed two strangers' hearts. Mrs. Jenkins, 3 rows ahead, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Mr. Rodriguez, the veteran who'd been first to join the 5 Kindness Challenge, nodded along, his weathered face soft with emotion. Even stern old Mr. Peterson was blinking rapidly behind his thick glasses. The second verse spoke of bridges built across oceans, of peace woven into patterns, of how small acts of mercy could echo across continents. Lily's voice carried the solo, clear and true, from palace halls to churchyard walls. God's love knows no divide. When hearts reach out across the dark and let his light inside. Ethan felt the weight of Ben's ceremonial coin in his pocket, smooth and solid against his leg. He thought of the prince, no, his young friend, sitting in that same depot, far from home and protocol, just a hungry boy in need of kindness. He remembered Ben's smile over shared pancakes, the way he'd bonded with Lily over her bracelet, how naturally he'd fit into their simple world. The choir moved into the bridge, their young voices gaining strength. Through storm and rain, through joy and pain, through darkness into light, one simple act of kindness shown can make the whole world bright. Around him, more tissues appeared. Mrs. Henderson at the piano was playing through tears, her shoulders moving with emotion. Deacon Ruth stood to the side, her hands clasped over her heart, watching her charges with pride. Images flashed through Ethan's mind, the viral video that had nearly broken them. The hospital room where he donated blood, the opening of the community pantry, and finally, yesterday's bracelet weave-in, where cultures and generations had come together in harmony. All of it flowing from one rainy morning and $5 he hadn't been sure he could spare. The final verse began softly, almost like a prayer. So when you see a stranger standing hungry in the rain, remember how God uses us to ease each other's pain. Lily's eyes found his as the choir moved into the final chorus. She touched her bracelet, matching his small smile with her radiant one. The coin in his pocket seemed to warm against his leg, a tangible reminder of friendship that had crossed boundaries of class and culture. The last notes hung in the air like morning mist. $5 and some kindness? That's all it took to start? When heaven touched the earth that day and changed two strangers' hearts. As the final note faded into reverent silence, Ethan felt the familiar weight of the coin in his pocket. He closed his eyes, letting the echoes of the song wash over him, carrying him back to that rainy morning that had changed everything. The autumn morning air was crisp as Ethan unlocked the front door of the Kamar Riverside Community Pantry. The clock on the wall hadn't quite struck 6, but he'd seen Mr. Jenkins shuffling down the sidewalk, leaning heavily on his cane. The elderly veteran never asked for help directly, but Ethan had learned to read the subtle signs of need in their small town. "Morning, Mr. Jenkins," Ethan called out, holding the door wide. "You're just in time for the first cup of coffee." The old man's weather-lined face crinkled into a grateful smile. "Wouldn't say no to that, son." Inside, the pantry looked different from the empty shell it had been just months ago. Warm yellow walls displayed quilts from the church ladies alongside colorful Kamari tapestries. Neat shelves lined with groceries stretched in orderly rows, arranged to feel more like a regular store than a charity. The coffee station near the entrance already hummed with fresh brew, filling the space with its welcoming aroma. "Have a seat while I get things started," Ethan said, pulling out a chair at one of the small cafe tables. These tables had been Lily's idea, so nobody has to eat alone, she'd insisted. Mr. Jenkins eased himself down with a quiet grunt. "Don't mean to put you out, being here so early and all." "No putting out about it," Ethan replied, pouring 2 mugs of coffee. He added cream and 2 sugars to Mr. Jenkins' cup, just the way he liked it. "Besides, Lily and I are morning people." As if on cue, the back door chimed, and Lily burst in, her backpack bouncing. "Dad, I brought the new pancake mix." She skidded to a stop, beaming at their guest. "Hi, Mr. Jenkins. Want to try my blueberry special?" The old man's eyes brightened. "Well now, how could anyone refuse an offer like that?" Ethan watched as Lily carefully tied on her junior volunteer apron, complete with a hand-stitched name tag from the church sewing circle. Her movements in the kitchen had grown more confident over the past weeks, though he still supervised the stove closely. While Lily gathered her ingredients, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the $5 bill he'd found in yesterday's donation jar. He'd been thinking about this moment since then, turning the worn paper over and over in his hands before bed. From his other pocket, he took out a small wooden sign he'd carved the night before. The letters were simple but neat. "Leave with dignity. Come back with joy." Using a piece of clear tape, he carefully secured the bill underneath the sign, then hung it near the entrance. "What's that for, Dad?" Lily asked, measuring flour into a bowl. "It's a reminder," Ethan said softly, adjusting the sign until it hung straight. "Sometimes people need to know it's okay to take help, and it's okay to come back." Mr. Jenkins nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "Ain't always easy to walk through that door the first time," he admitted, "but you folks make it feel different here." The griddle was warming up now, and Lily had her tongue stuck out in concentration as she stirred the batter. "Can I flip this one by myself?" she asked, carefully pouring out a perfect circle. "Go ahead, sweetheart," Ethan said, staying close. "Remember what I taught you about watching the bubbles." Lily giggled as she slid the spatula under the pancake, her face scrunched in determination. With a quick flick of her wrist, she managed a somewhat wobbly but successful flip. "I did it!" "That you did," Mr. Jenkins applauded. "Looks like a right proper pancake to me." More early visitors began trickling in as the morning brightened. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door brought fresh eggs to share. Tom from the veterans group arrived with day-old bread from his bakery. Each person who came through the door added something to the growing breakfast gathering. Food, stories, laughter. Ethan moved between the kitchen and the store floor, helping elderly patrons reach high shelves, carrying bags to cars, and making sure coffee cups stayed full. Every now and then, his eyes would drift to that $5 bill under the sign, remembering a rainy morning at the bus depot that felt like a lifetime ago. The morning sun climbed higher, streaming through the front windows and catching the colorful threads of the woven bracelets on both his and Lily's wrists. His daughter was serving her latest batch of pancakes now, chatting away with Miss Pearl about choir practice, while the old woman's service dog dozed at her feet. "More coffee, Mr. Jenkins?" Ethan asked, noticing the empty cup. "Think I'm about done," the older man replied, pushing himself up from his chair. "Need to get on home before it gets too warm out." Ethan watched as Mr. Jenkins made his way to the grocery section, filling his basket with careful dignity. At the checkout, he insisted on leaving $2 in the donation jar. Not much, but it was what he could give today. That was the beauty of how things worked here now. Everyone gave what they could, took what they needed, and no one kept score. The morning sun had reached its full strength now, flooding the pantry with golden light. It caught the threads of Ethan's bracelet as he helped Miss Jenkins with his bags. The simple woven pattern, a constant reminder of promises kept and bridges built. Beside him, Lily's own bracelet sparkled as she waved goodbye to their friend, her other hand already reaching for the spatula to make more pancakes. The breakfast crowd was picking up, the small tables filling with neighbors, sharing meals and stories. Looking around at the busy pantry, at the dignity on people's faces as they shopped, at the joy in simple moments of connection, Ethan felt a deep sense of rightness settle in his chest. This was exactly where they needed to be. Lily's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Dad, the pancake's ready to flip. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending." If you thought this was just the beginning, you're right. Click through and see where the story takes you next. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Cole, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.